Honor violence. Duels. Honor violence is defined as a violent crime or incident which may have been committed to protect or defend the honor of the family or community, or in this case, an individual. The act of single combat duels to preserve or restore honor developed in the 16th century in Europe, rising to its peak popularity in the early 17th century. The weapon of choice during this time was the short sword. Duels became so popular in England, in fact, that King James I attempted to suppress them, though of course this did not entirely work. Dueling declined in practice until its revival during the Restoration era. Then, in the early 1760s, dueling with pistols became common, and swords were quickly abandoned in favor of the guns. Surprisingly, the shift from swords to guns actually lowered the mortality rate of duels. Of 105 sampled sword duels, more than one-fifth of the participants were killed, another fourth was wounded, and only half of the participants escaped unscathed. Pistols, on the other hand, resulted in only 6.5% of 214 recorded participants being killed, and over 71% left the duel unharmed. This drastic difference statistically is likely due to the fact that dueling with pistols put both participants on far more equal ground. Those facing off in a single sword duel were often unequal in skill, whereas a pistol took far less training to use properly. Swords and pistols were not the only methods of dueling, though they were preferred by the upper classes. In the lower classes, boxing was the most popular method of settling a dispute. As with any form of violence, dueling for honor left many with injuries, or worse, dead. Injuries varied fight to fight, depending on the method or weapon used, and if both parties adhered to the dueling codes and regulations. With swords, a duel was a fight to the first sign of blood. The duel could end after one participant simply scratched the other's arm with the blade. If the insult to the victim's honor was greater, the fight could only be satisfied if one party was incapacitated. The gravest of blows to an individual's honor required a fight to the death. With pistols, it was common that only a single shot was fired on each side. The duel was then satisfied by their mutual willingness to risk death. Unfortunately, it was never guaranteed that the victim would not end up being the one injured or killed. An example of a duel and injuries that can occur from one can be seen in this following clip from the 1977 historical drama The Duelists, directed by Ridley Scott. One of the most famous duels today, due to the popular rap musical Hamilton, is that between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr in 1804. The two had come to detest each other, and after Hamilton fervently campaigned against his bid to become governor of New York, Burr sought to regain his reputation by challenging Hamilton to a duel. They met at the dueling grounds near Weehawken, New Jersey, where Burr shot his opponent in the stomach. Hamilton died the following day, and Burr was charged with the murder. Acquitted, he fled to Europe to escape the public, who turned against him following the duel. Men were not the only ones to duel. In 1792, Mrs. Elphinston offended Lady Braddock by making a comment about the woman's age. Upon paying a social call to Lady Braddock, Mrs. Elphinston was challenged to a duel in Hyde Park. They began with pistols, Mrs. Elphinston firing first and knocking her opponent's hat to the ground. They then switched weapons to swords, and Lady Braddock got revenge by cutting the other woman's arm. The petticoat duel, as it came to be called, ended when Mrs. Elphinston agreed to pen a letter apologizing for her remark about the lady's age. Former President Andrew Jackson fought a staggering number of duels, with a total of 103 duels on record. The majority of these duels were regarding his wife's honor, who was frequently talked about for being with Jackson before her divorce with her first husband was finalized. One such man who insulted her was a gunslinger named Charles Dickinson, who is credited with 26 kills in pistol duels. During the duel, both turned and fired, Dickinson hitting Jackson near the heart. Jackson retaliated with a shot to Dickinson's throat, killing him instantly. Jackson lived, but the bullet remained in his chest as it was too close to his heart to remove safely. He was never prosecuted for Dickinson's death, and it seemed to have no adverse effect on his presidential campaign later on.